Hello, this is Alex from the Infant Feeding Team. I'm doing the Facebook Live again today. Just let me know if you can see me or hear me. I haven't seen anyone join yet. But, it's just me again today. So unfortunately, I'm still at home. Naomi is holding the fort in the hospital, so hopefully we'll be together again next week. So I'm doing the session from home. But, I can see faces joining. That's lovely. It's always nice to see all the pictures, all the icons coming up with you on there. It's nice to see that. But, okay, so today's session, I think we'll just obviously, you tend to follow what everybody's coming up with and what they're thinking about. You know, obviously your questions will drive what we talk about today. We cover very similar things often week in, week out, but it's always worth having a look over some of the older ones as well. I'm sure that a lot of key topics will keep coming up. I thought we'd talk about stomach sizes to start with, and that's one that has come up a number of times before, because it is something that comes up over and over again when we're talking to parents, is thinking about the stomach size of a baby and how that increases really rapidly. And actually your milk supply does exactly the same. It meets that at the same time. So, you know, as your baby's requirement for food increases, so does your milk supply, as long as you're pushing it. And that's the key thing. And I know we talk about this on these sessions quite often. It's really important to keep pushing the milk supply. So your milk supply is driven by milk removal. So if your baby isn't doing a particularly good job, you're going to have to do a bit of that work for your baby, help them out, get that milk supply going, because your body's not going to bother making milk if it doesn't think it's needed. So it's thinking about, you know, initially we always talk about such small amounts with colostrum, but it's so important. Colostrum is this wonderful, wonderful product in small amounts. It's like a golden syrup. It's absolutely chock-a-block with everything your baby needs in those first few days, but in a tiny weeny amount. And when we talk about the stomach size, we tend to talk about marbles, and so we have these little marbles that we use. So this is the marble that we tend to use as a newborn's stomach size in the first day or so. And that really doesn't hold very much, as you can see, and I'm dropping it on the top. As you can see, it's really tiny, but within 3 days, we're already looking at a stomach being this size. And I mean, that it goes up so rapidly, and then we're looking at a stomach that's gone up to this size by about a week or 2 weeks. So you can see the change is so rapid. Now your milk supply needs to follow that. So your milk supply needs to keep giving more and more and more. And what we often find is that mums maybe are managing to get off some milk, you know, colostrum, and are expressing, and maybe go home expressing, which is absolutely fine because they're establishing their milk supply, but don't take on board the increase in milk supply that a baby needs. That each day, if you're going home and you're doing a little bit of colostrum and giving them that on day 0 and day 1, then actually those volumes really, really need to increase quite rapidly. And by day 3, we're looking at really good volumes of milk, 20 odd mils really that baby's beginning to need. And that carries on increasing quite rapidly, until we know that most mums will produce in the region of 750 mils a day. So it's bearing in mind that although when we say to you in those first days that, a tiny bit of colostrum, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, maybe up to a mil, is absolutely sufficient a number of times in a 24-hour period, those volumes really need to carry on going up. And that goes up each day, every single day, until they're getting sort of a week or 2 weeks old, and then you've got an established milk supply. So the baby's requirement changes rapidly. Feedback we get from parents sometimes is they feel that they get conflicting advice, that we don't give them, that we're not always saying the same thing, but actually what it is it's changing advice because the baby's changing. So what a baby needs or does in the first 24 hours is not the same as what it needs or does in the sort of, the 3rd day, 4th day into a week. So in those first days, you might only be getting, 1 wee or 2 wees and maybe 1 poo. But by the time you get to day 4, we want that baby to be doing 2 yellow poos every day. And I know we've talked about this before, that this 2 yellow poos is really important. It's a really good indicator that your baby's getting enough milk, and that the wees are increasing too, that you're seeing every single day those wees are going up. And that, until you get to day 6, where you're seeing 6 heavy wet nappies. So it's really important that you see that increase until it then plateaus sort of at the end of it about 2 weeks. Now I can see we've got a question come through, and I'm hoping I'm going to pick it up on my laptop today so we don't end up with the problem I had last week where I kept flipping the screen. Let's just see if I can see the question on here. I can see it on my phone, but I can't see it on here because it's from Lisa. Let's see if, there we go. Brilliant. That means I'm not going to flip the screen today. That's great. So Lisa's come through with our first question today. Thank you, Lisa. My baby's exclusively breastfed and is 18 weeks old. He seems hungrier and hungrier at the moment and is waking lots in the night. My breasts feel empty at times. Am I better to start giving weaning things to him? I also want to express some milk in order to have a few hours break. But if he's constantly feeding at the moment, yes, is it a good idea? He's a good weight. Wow, 17 pounds, he is good weight at 16 weeks. So he's putting on weight, just knowing what to do next. Well, we wouldn't be talking about giving other foods at this point in time because at 18 weeks, he's just over 4 months, isn't he? And we're really looking at withholding, not offering other foods until they get to about 6 months. What happens, in the past it happened when my babies were little, we did. But the problem with that is that what we know now is that all you do is displace the milk, and the milk is what makes babies grow. So they haven't got the enzymes, they haven't got the ability to break down other foods. So if you give him other foods at this stage, you're just filling him up with something that he can't make the most of. So actually giving him more milk is definitely more beneficial. So it's just working out what's going on there. I mean, at 18 weeks, it might be well worth having a chat with your health visitor. And I can see you've added a bit more on. Let me have a quick look and see what you've said. He hasn't taken well to a bottle. I tried him formula various times of a day with different teats, Tommy Tippy bottles. Am I better changing the milk and bottle? Well, at 18 weeks, he might know what he likes, and many babies, when they're breastfed, really love to be breastfed and they don't really want anything else. But if it's something you do need to do, maybe try it with express breast milk instead, if you can manage to express. I know you've said that's difficult, and I totally get that. The time that most women find the easiest to get milk is first thing in the morning. So often what happens, I know you've fed all night, but often what happens in the morning is women have more milk in the morning. So they feed their baby and then they pump. So, and that's usually a good feed to try offering, getting some express breast milk off. So maybe try that, Lisa, and see how you get on. And maybe offering it with express milk in it, he might be more inclined to take it. Sometimes it's better if you're giving a bottle, and if that's what you want to do, that it isn't you that's giving it, because as far as he's concerned, he knows where milk comes from, and it comes from you, and it doesn't come from a piece of plastic. So he might rather, if he's with you, then actually thinking, he might be thinking, I'd much rather have my mum and don't want to do it. So maybe go out, let your partner do it. And also try when he's not desperately hungry, because if he's desperately hungry, he knows where his food comes from. He thinks, well, it comes from mummy, it comes from her breast. So he's not going to be inclined to try something new. So let him try the bottle if that's what you want him to do. But at times when he's not necessarily hungry, let somebody else give it a go as well. It can be really distressing as the mum of a baby, and you can breastfeed your baby, and someone else is trying to give the bottle. If you get, it's really upsetting to listen to your baby crying in those instances. So try when he's not really hungry. Try pumping first thing in the morning if you're trying to get a little bit of milk off, because that really is the time most women have more milk and do better with the pump. And just get that positioning attachment checked again. I know that we say this all the time, but just maybe get your health visitor to have a look and see if she can help you with your positioning and attachment, and just see, if there's something that could be improved on that so that he's feeding more effectively. Because you've obviously done a great job. He's grown so beautifully. He's a lovely weight. So it's just, we want to keep it going, really. And remember that breastfeeding is way more than just food. He's looking for that closeness and comfort. If he's got a bit of a cold or he's brewing something, then he'll be looking for the breast, because that's what makes him feel good. So if it's a very short term thing that he's been a bit more wanting the breast, maybe he's brewing a little bit of a cold or something, and that's why he's coming to the breast more frequently. So there could be numerous reasons, and not necessarily because he's looking for food, because that's not the only reason babies feed. You've asked as well, Lisa, and I'm glad you've given me all these questions, because otherwise I'd be having to fill in the gaps. How long to pump for, and just the once a day? Well, it depends how much you want to be giving. So if you are trying to pump and you just need the odd bottle, then really and truly just first thing in the morning is a really good time to do it. Depending on what pump you've got, depends on what you do, but we would never put time on it. We always talk about being guided by the flow and not the clock. So whilst let's say you use, for instance, a hand pump, because I've got one here. Let's say you use a hand pump. You would put the hand pump on, and for this week, because I didn't have a breast last week, I've made a makeshift breast, so bear with me. You would put your pump onto the breast, you do a few quick goes with the handle to get the milk coming, and when you start to see the milk coming, you bring your handle in and you hold it long time. It's nice and long. You watch the milk dripping, and it'll drip down here, and then release, and then go again. The release is the quick bit, the hold is the long bit. So it's release, go again, and do that. What you do is you watch the milk coming, and whilst the milk is coming, you keep pumping, and when it really begins to slow or stop entirely, you have a break. So if you're using a hand pump, you're only going to be doing one breast at a time. So you do the one breast, and then you'll go on to the other. I can see you've told me it's an electric one, but this is valid anyway. And it's the same because your Tommee Tippee is probably a single, knowing what they're like. I'm assuming it's a single. And the basis is exactly the same, is that you pump on the one breast until no more milk is coming, and then you swap to the other until no more milk is coming. Then you go back to the first until no more milk comes, and back to the second. And you keep going backwards and forwards, doing each breast probably 3 times. And that way you get the best letdowns, because when a baby's feeding, when you watch your baby feed, Lisa, you'll see he feeds and pauses and feeds and pauses. And the swapping from one side to the other is the equivalent of his feeding and pausing. So because you're doing that, you're getting another letdown and another letdown. If you just pumped the once and stopped, you'd leave all the other letdowns in the breast. So you wouldn't be making the most of the milk that you've got in the breast. You'd be getting more off that way. So I'm pretty sure your Tommee Tippee will be a single electrics. I think they are. So just go backwards and forwards, being guided by the flow rather than the time. And sometimes you'll be sitting there for a bit longer than others. It depends. Every day is not the same. But I hope that answers your question, Lisa, and thank you again for giving me some questions. That's a lovely start. Charlotte's come and said hello and hope we're well and keeping safe. We are. I seem to have avoided coming up unwell, although my daughter's not well. Anyway, but thank you, Charlotte, one of our frequent visitors. So any other questions coming through for me? Brilliant. Okay. And remember, Lisa, Lisa's just come up to say she's going to have a go this afternoon. I will point out the afternoons are often the time when the mums don't get so much milk, but give it a go. But I reckon you'll get better results first thing in the morning, because that's when most mums do get better results. Mothers get quite disheartened pumping in the afternoon. See how you get on. Amy's come through. Her son is 5 weeks old and she's exclusively breastfeeding. He's been having lots of colic. I was wondering what I can do to help with it, if she can, as sometimes it affects his feeding. Thank you. I know I sound like a scratch record. Go back to positioning attachment. Just make sure you're doing as good a job as you can. Think about that positioning attachment. He's 5 weeks now. He'll have grown quite a bit. So think about, are you starting nose opposite nipple? I know that sounds really, we say it every week, but it really does make a difference. And, we see women coming into our breastfeeding clinics and they are, they've been seen by people, and people have said, it's fine. And actually we can still see the room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. So remember that nose opposite nipple, starting nose opposite nipple. And this is where, when babies are getting bigger, it gets more difficult, because you pick your baby up. I think what I did with my baby is behind me. You pick your baby up and you line him up in exactly the same way as you did before, but actually what you're ending up with him is he's too far over and you need to bring him back. So you end up with more baby coming round you. So he's going to get more and more and more around you, because he still needs to start nose opposite nipple, which is so crucial. So thinking about that, I know that might sound really basic, but we just know that we quite often have this, that we see mums and their babies have got that much bigger and it makes a difference. And we know that a baby who isn't going on as brilliantly as they can won't get that lovely balance of the milk and that lovely higher fat milk that settles their tummy, that makes them happy, which stops colic in a breastfed baby. So it's thinking about that, positioning and attachment. And you can only achieve this if you've started really nose opposite nipple, because you need that chin back, so it's head back, chin touching the breast first, and this lovely, lovely big gap underneath the nipple, and with the upper lip just skimming the nipple. So really make sure you're trying to get him like this, Amy. And I know we say it every week, but we just know it makes such a difference. Getting the positioning and attachment right really is the answer to most breastfeeding problems. So have another look at what you're doing. Make sure you're starting nose opposite nipple, Amy, because it really, really does make a difference. And as the babies get bigger, we tend to not move them round further. So just bring him round. He's not going to be in straight in front of you. He's going to be much more coming round you. Get him to hug the contours of your body. Get him right round you, and hopefully things will start to get better. Because colic in a breastfed baby is usually that they're not on as well as they could be. So see how you get on with that. Let me carry on. I know we've had a few more. I've seen them popping up. Tan has come on. She's got a 6-week-old and discovered his hands and is sucking them. Never sure, is this a feeding cue or him just exploring? Oh, I know what you mean. We always say that when we're talking to mums about their feeding cues. You know, all the different things that make up a feeding cue, and it could be, you know, that they're awake and they're rooting and they're looking and putting their hands in their mouth. Is one of the ones we say. I think it's a case of watching and seeing what he does. I mean, you know, pick him up, see if he's looking for the breast, or is he just quite happy exploring his hands. It is quite difficult to know, because they really do find their hands and are very happy just playing with their hands and aren't actually hungry. I think it's just going to be a case of watching your baby and seeing what they do, you know, if you don't then pick them up and feed them, or just pick them up and see what he does then. I'm sorry, that's not a really brilliant answer, but it is one of those things that is quite difficult, because you know, we always say putting hands in the mouth is a feeding cue, but they do also do that for other reasons too, because they've discovered their hands. They love them. I'm not sure I've really helped on that one. I'm sorry, Tam, but moving on to Jessica. She says, when you start feeding, do you suggest feeding on both breasts each feed or just on one breast? Last time I was advised different, hang on, it's just disappeared, different things. So the reason that people get told to feed only on one side is because of a fear of the baby not finishing the feed. And in the past, women have been quite, you know, mothers have been taking babies off and popping them on the other side, being guided by time. Now, we always say be guided by what the baby's doing. So the baby should come off all on their own. I'll get my little trusty booklet out again. They should tell you when they've had enough. So babies will often look like they've fallen asleep, and they come off looking like this. And as I said to some mums this morning, or mums-to-be this morning, they can either just let the nipple just slip out of the mouth, or they can literally dramatically and come off the breast and do a real dramatic coming off the breast, and they tell you finished. But that we would still then say offer the second side. So a breastfeed is both breasts offered. So you would be offering the first breast, let your baby finish, they come off on their own. Anywhere between 5 and 40 minutes is considered normal. And when they've come off, you see what they want to do. Do they want more? You know, are they alert? Oh, we go back to the feeding cues. Are they showing feeding cues? Are they looking for more food? If you offer them the breast, do they go back on? So invariably, if they're awake, they will take more. And that's when we would say offer the second breast. So from our point of view, a breastfeed is always both breasts offered, but a baby may not always take both breasts. So if you've offered both breasts, you'll start the next feed on the breast that you finished on. And if you only offered one breast, you'd start on the breast that you didn't offer. So I hope that clarifies it. But really and truly, a breastfeed is both breasts are offered. So, you know, bearing in mind, it's a bit like offering pudding. So you're saying, you've had your main course, do you want pudding? And sometimes your baby will, and sometimes your baby won't. But be ready to be offering it. So think in your head, a feed is both breasts offered. When we talk about the 5 to 40 minutes, so we think a breastfeed is anywhere between 5 and 40 minutes, that's on one side. So you are then going to offer the second side. So a feed is going to be 40 minutes plus the second side. So see how you get on with that. But that's what we would normally be saying. So it's a bit of a mix. Right, I'm just scoot down and make sure I haven't missed any of the other questions. So that was Jessica's question. Charlotte has said her baby girl loves to loves to have breast milk formula and also eating stage 1 food and has 2 teeth now. Wow, your baby's really grown up. That's incredible. Yes, she's nearly 6 months, so perfect. And that's when you would be introducing other foods at about 6 months. They start to show readiness and they start showing that ready for food at that age. So, you know, that's perfect. We wouldn't be offering foods before then because they're just not ready for it. They haven't got the developmental ability to cope with the food in their mouth. And when Naomi and I were giving solid foods to our babies, weaning foods to our babies, We found that invariably as much came out as went in because they didn't have the ability to take the food to the back of their mouth. So they'd be spitting it out and we'd be putting it back in, and they'd be spitting it out and we'd be putting it back in. So we know that actually this holding off to 6 months is a really important thing, considering their development and their ability to make the most of the food that you're giving them. So, so Alicia, fabulous. That's lovely to hear about your lovely girl. That's really nice. Right, Tan's come back. She said, that makes sense, thank you. I'm glad it makes sense to you. Gaia has said her daughter is 7 weeks old and she's had some latching problems since she was born, so I decided to pump and feed her with a bottle. Until now, she's doing great. I'd love her to latch, and I'm very worried about the supply. At 3 to 4 months will be the same, thank you. We know that if you are pumping long term, there can be a dip in your supply. It's very hard when you're pumping, and actually babies drive the supply much better. So Gaia, if you could get her back to the breast, that would be fantastic. The other thing is, if you do carry on pumping, is to think about frequent, not regular. So don't set your clock to 3 hourly. Think, I've got a 24-hour day. I need to pump a minimum of 8 times in 24 hours. Some of those can be close together. Some of those can be further apart. So you might have a few times where you pump maybe once an hour for a few hours, and then you might have a 4-hour gap or a 4.5-hour gap or something, or 5-hour gap. And actually what you're doing then is what we call surprising the breasts. You're telling the breasts, I need this milk, but I'm not going to tell you when I want it. And that way they don't get lulled into a false sense of security of always giving the same amount of milk without increasing what it is. So we know that this surprising the breasts does a much better job of keeping your milk supply going, rather than keeping to a regular routine where actually we find mum's milk supply drops off. As your baby's now 7 weeks old, you'd be under the enhanced breastfeeding team for the health visitors. So perhaps get in touch with your health visitor and ask them to give you a hand, see if you can get your baby back to the breast and feeding from your breast. You don't have to do so much pumping. That would be a lot easier for you. I think that would be, if we can do that, that would be great, and it'll be a lot easier for you. But good luck with the pumping. So remember, surprise the breasts. Don't keep to regular routines. Do some close together, some further apart. You'll get a better yield from your milk supply that way. And contact your health visitor for some support on that. Jenny has come and said something that I've just saw pop up on my news feed, that Oxford City is going into Tier 2 lockdown as of Saturday. What impact will this have on pregnant ladies and appointments and dads to be supporting mums at the appointment? Thanks. Well, at the moment, we're only having fathers in for very few appointments anyway, so I think that's not going to make a really big difference. To be honest, I can't tell you because I've literally just seen that news feed as well, and I haven't been told anything yet. I'm sure that information will be coming out soon, and we will be informed what's going on, because obviously we've been running breastfeeding clinics, outpatient breastfeeding clinics as an infant feeding team, so we're going to have to wait and be told what we're doing, whether we're still able to offer our breastfeeding clinic appointments. Thankfully we're now up and running, doing a lot more with online, which makes, I know it's not absolutely ideal, but it is better than what we had initially. And on that one, Jenny, we're going to have to wait and see what we're informed. I did see an email come out, and I'll have to check, and we'll be getting back to you. Knowing Oxfordshire Maternity Voices Partnership, I'm sure that they will get the information out to you as soon as possible. So sorry, I can't give you any more information at this point in time, but I've literally just found out myself. Jenny's come back and said Jessica's come back and said thank you. Gemma has written. Let me just see what Gemma's written. I get a whole answer up. They pop up. This is the problem. As they come up, it pops the last one down. So let's just see what Gemma has written quite a long message. She's struggling a lot with milk supply, which never really came in after her daughter's birth. At day 5 weigh-in, we were put onto a feeding plan, advised to top up the formula, as she clearly wasn't getting what she needed. At 2 weeks, she was diagnosed with retained placenta. That was probably one of her problems, I'm afraid, which was at least a relief in terms of explaining why this was happening. Yes, exactly. Obviously, this was moved, but during this period, my supply effectively stopped completely. As soon as I was discharged, let me just get down. I started a pumping regime 8 times a day. Wow, you good woman. Over the 10 days since, the amount I'm able to express is increasing only minimally, maybe 60 mils total over 24 hours if I'm lucky. And I'm struggling to see how I'll catch up with her hunger levels. I'm trying hands-on pumping, which is perfect. That's exactly what you need to be doing. That's a really good thing to be doing. Trying hands-on pumping. I know you say you don't feel it's making a difference, but it will be really good for your oxytocin levels because your hands are on, you're being tactile, and that makes a big difference. And you've never had a heavy or full feeling. She would like to be able to breastfeed your baby again at some point. I can do what you're talking about. Is it possible that I just won't return? It won't return. Refusing to prescribe domperidone, and I'm already on fenugreek. So I think, it's maximising what you're giving, Gemma. I'm sorry you're having such a tough time. That really is quite challenging. I think you're doing absolutely everything you can be doing. It's totally up to the GP as to whether they prescribe domperidone or not, because it's an unlicensed medication for the reason that we use it in lactation, and so it's on the GP as to whether they prescribe it or not. So we can't tell them to do it. They'll do it if they were happy to or not. So it's very much their choice. You're also using fenugreek, which has some anecdotal association with milk increase, and you're doing all the pumping. So I think you are doing everything you can be doing. The only other thing we could think about is whether we use the nursing supplementer. So the additional milk that she gets, she has at the breast. I haven't got one here with me to show you, but it's just literally like having a tiny weeny tube that is then goes into your baby's mouth while she's feeding at the breast, and she would get additional milk that way. So she's feeding at the breast, so that keeps her at the breast. She gets all the milk that you're producing as well, but she gets her additional milk at the same time. So it's a feed at the breast, but with additional milk, and that might help because that would mean that you could be doing feeding at the breast as opposed to all the pumping you're doing, so that she's getting milk from you. We would do that if you came and had a breastfeeding clinic appointment with us. I'm just wondering how old your baby was. I can't remember now. I'm sorry, it was at the top. I don't think you're over 6 weeks. So in that case, Gemma, can I suggest you get in touch with us and we try and get you booked into breastfeeding clinic and we try you with a nursing supplementer? I know, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen tier 2 as to whether we're going to carry on with appointments. I'm hoping we are, and assuming we are, we would be hopefully able to see you tail end of next week or the beginning of the following. I know that Mondays are already busy. Gemma, you've come back, so she's 3.5 weeks. So you would fit within our criteria because we see babies up to 6 weeks. So maybe give us a call. My colleague Naomi's in today. You could give her a call and see if you can get yourself booked into breastfeeding clinic. Hopefully for the tail end of next week, which should be Thursday or Monday of the following week, depending on how clinic's looking, because we do get booked up quite far in advance. So Gemma, give us a shout and let's see what we can do to help you, because we may not be able to increase your milk supply greatly, but we can get her feeding from the breast, so she's getting breast milk and the formula milk at the same time, and that keeps her at the breast and it maximises on what you're able to give her and gives you that breastfeeding experience for both of you. So see how you get on with that, Gemma. So let me just carry on down to see what else I've got down here. This is the problem when you're doing it on your own. You've got to do Francesca has said her baby's 3 weeks old and feeding well, but only with a nipple shield. So I'm trying to wean him off, but it's slow going as I'm only trying latching without when he's not too hungry. I'm not too tired. Would you recommend continuing to take it slow? And do you have any other tips? Thank you. I think you're doing it absolutely the right way. We know that nipple shields become the baby's domain. It's totally up to the baby when they stop using a nipple shield, and we can try and encourage them, like doing exactly what you've just said, which would be to try him at the breast without it, and try him particularly when he's not hungry. Don't try and put him to the breast when he's starving hungry without the shield, because he will be really cross and upset. So you could try taking it off partway through the feed. You could try after a feed, trying lots and lots and lots of skin-to-skin contact. We talk about skin-to-skin contact all the time, but it really is that reaffirming of the baby being with the mum and reminding the baby that the breast is a really nice place to be, that it gives them that chance to try without feeling terribly hungry, and no pressure on them to be getting food. So you're already doing all the things we'd be suggesting in that respect, so keep trying when he's not desperately hungry. Try loads and loads of skin contact, and again, not when he's desperately hungry, because that really will become a recipe of disaster. If he starts to get very, very upset, stop, do something else, feed him in another way, but see how you get on, Francesca. But I feel for you, because we see this a lot, babies that start with nipple shields. And if anybody doesn't know what the nipple shield is, this is what is a nipple shield. So this is one type. There are lots of different types, but they're a piece of plastic that goes over the nipple, and originally they were designed to to help mothers when they were sore, but actually that's not a good use for what they are. So, you know, that's what we find is babies then start using them, and mothers then find the baby doesn't want to come off. We really, really don't recommend their use in the early days because they inhibit milk supply. So the two things that we're always concerned about are, one, that that the baby gets so used to them we can't get the baby off, and two, that they don't allow the baby to stimulate the supply. So they really should only be used if we absolutely have to. So the times that we as a team would be bringing them in are when we've got a baby that really, really won't attach at the breast, has probably only had bottles, and actually if you put a nipple shield on in that instance, you know, if it's 2-3 weeks down the line and you put a shield on at that instance, when the milk supply is established, the baby will actually feed from the breast, and then they have a place. But in the early days, to just mask being sore, or we're not addressing the problem. We need to address why is this mum sore? Why is this baby going on in such a way that is making this mum sore? And the nipple shield is not the answer in the early days. So I really feel for you, Francesca, because actually when you have used them for whatever reason, the baby then becomes the boss, and it's up to them when they come off. So keep going with what you're doing. I think you're already doing a great job, and just keep going. Let's see what else we've got coming up. Gemma's apologised for her message. That's fine, you needed to say it, that's absolutely fine, but do get in touch. So Joe says, I'm only feeding on one breast, baby just won't latch on the other, 5 weeks old and growing, seems happy and feeding every 3 to 4 hours. Do you think it's okay to carry on with just one? Absolutely, definitely. So if you think about it, a mother who's feeding twins, their baby effectively really only gets one breast. So we know that twins are common enough in our society and in humanity that we tend to produce enough milk for 2 babies initially, and as long as it's stimulated, obviously, and that's the whole thing we always talk about stimulation. So you would have enough to feed your baby from one side. If that works for you, that's absolutely fine. And we have women who choose to feed only on one side because maybe they've had recurrent mastitis on one side, and the only way of dealing with that is to shut down production on that side. We also have instances where women have had surgery on one side and the milk supply just doesn't come on that side. So there are lots of reasons why women might only feed from one side, but there's no reason why you can't do it. If your baby's grown and you've got enough milk, there's absolutely no issue with it. The only thing is, obviously, from an aesthetic point of view, you might find you're a bit imbalanced. You've got one breast that's bigger than the other, but then that's quite natural in society anyway. Many of us don't have equal breasts anyway. But if you're happy with that, there's no reason why you couldn't carry on just feeding on one side if you've got enough milk. So that sounds great. So that was Joe. So he's doing a great job. Their 5-week-old. Charlotte has said, Charlotte said she'd go through pregnancy again as she loves her baby so much. So isn't that lovely? I think that's what happens. You think you get to the end of labour and you think, whoa, would I do that again? And then you fall in love with your baby, and yes, you do it again. So Gemma's saying her baby's 3.5 weeks. I think I picked that one up. Brilliant. Gemma's going to give us a call. Francesca said thank you. Oh, no more questions for the moment, ladies. Have you got anything else for me, or gents as well? Do send any more questions through. So we were chatting about, I've already mentioned nipple shields. I've talked about, the hand pump. And the other thing that you sometimes see is, you might see out there are what are called breast shells. This is a breast shell. So a breast shell collects milk. So if you were feeding on one side, what many women will find, not all, many women will find that they leak on both sides. So if your baby goes on one side, they leak on the other, and that's why double pumping works so well. So actually what some women will do is put a breast shell in to collect the drip milk on the other side. It's got a little pourer at the top if you have a look. So that wants to go up, because if you put it that way, you can just imagine what's going to happen. The breast goes into the middle. My homemade breast goes into the middle like that, and it sits in the bra, and the milk is collected. Now bear in mind that the milk that you drip is the first part of the feed. That's really high in sugar, really high in water-soluble vitamins, not high in fat. And so actually what you're dripping is that lower fat milk, still fantastic, still brilliant for your baby, but if you're only giving drip milk, let's say you collected it over a day, put it all in one bottle and gave it to your baby, then they might not be as satisfied as if it had been a pumped milk, where you would have had a better balance of the drip milk, you know, a better balance of the higher fat and lower fat milk that you get in a feed that a baby's so good at removing, much better than we are. So it's brilliant, it's fantastic milk, but it is drip milk. What some other people use are collectors that have a vacuum as well. So rather than just being this, which is passive, is that it's more like a pump, but it isn't a pump as such, and it's silicone, and you squish the bottom. So if you imagine this was silicone, you'd squish the bottom and put this bit onto the breast, and it holds on with the vacuum. One of the makes that you can find is called Hacker, but there are a number of them out there. That's not the only one, and they're quite cheap, about £15. And so if you've only got a single pump, you could try a Hacker on the other side if you are having to try and push your milk supply. And quite a few women find that really works very well, because it encourages leaking, because it's got that bit of pressure, because you've put this vacuum going on here. You've put that little bit of vacuum there, so there's a negative pressure, and that encourages the milk dripping. So some women find that really works well if they're pumping on one side and they put the Hacker on the other, or they're feeding on one side and they put the Hacker on the other. That encourages milk, sort of dripping, and allows them to collect it. So Lucy's come up, said she's listened. I'm just going to open her whole message so I don't have to stop a minute. I've listened to your sessions through the later stages of pregnancy and they've been so helpful. Brilliant, I'm glad. We've got a 9-day-old baby, congratulations, Mia now, and we're getting on well with feeding. Do you have any advice on burping? Our baby suffers with hiccups often after feeding. Can this be linked to ineffective burping? Hiccups are really normal, and I bet there are many of you out there who will say you remember your baby having hiccups inside, when they were in your tummy. It was quite funny, because when you're aware that it's hiccups, it becomes really obvious, because you can feel that rhythmic bump, bump, bump going on. So hiccups are really, really normal. We're not worried about them at all. It's not to do with your burping. It's just a normal thing that babies do. It can be quite off-putting when a baby's got hiccups and they're trying to feed. They get quite upset about it because it stops them feeding well, but I wouldn't worry about it. So any upright position for winding, so I get my trusty doll out. So any upright position, so up on the shoulder, babies love being there because they can feel your heart, or you could have them sitting on your knee and you have them in this sort of position. So you have them sitting like that and you support their chin and have their back nice and straight. Anything upright will bring up the wind. And remember that, if your baby's breastfeeding, that actually there's no air in the breast. So actually it's not like when a baby's bottle feeding, there is air in a bottle. So if the baby's feeding well and they haven't had a really good shout beforehand, got really upset beforehand, the likelihood of them having a burp is slim. So just don't spend hours waiting for a burp. That's not going to happen. Just give your baby that opportunity for a few minutes after the feed, upright, either up on the shoulder or sitting on your lap, and that they'll bring up any air that they're going to bring up. So that's really all you need to do. But hiccups we don't worry about. They're quite normal. I hope that reassures you. Now I can see questions coming through. Let me just find out. This is where I'm one of my own. It's slightly more difficult. So that was Lucy. Hope that helped, Lucy. Emma. So she's exclusively breastfeeding her 4-week-old now, going well, putting on loads of weight. Brilliant. He is so noisy at night though, grunting away, squeaking, etc. Although he's asleep. Is there anything anything relating to feeding that I could try to reduce this, or is this just a normal baby thing? It's just a normal baby thing. I can remember when mine was young, my eldest was really young, and it was like sleeping with an old man in the room. There was so much noise coming from her. It is quite a normal thing. And the reason that that you have her in your room is that protective property of having her in your room, because actually she's listening to you too. She's aware you being in the room keeps her it stops her from dropping into a really, really deep sleep. It's absolutely, so one of the key parts of having her in your room is that you're stopping her going to a very, very deep sleep, which is linked to sudden infant death. So we know that the whole reason for having your babies in your bedroom is because it's protective against that. So much as it's really tough when you've got a really noisy baby, it is really important that you keep her with you in that room, in your room, because you're stopping her You're protecting her by you being there, and the noises that you make overnight, and probably nowhere near as noisy as her, do help her in that respect. So the whole thing about 6 months in your own room, sleeping on her back, foot to foot, all these things are known to really, really protect our babies and are really crucial. But I do understand what you mean about the noise. It can be really disconcerting. Hopefully you'll get used to it, or she'll get a bit quieter. But yeah, I feel for you. The last thing you need is when you can finally get some sleep is that your baby's making a racket. So let me carry on because I can see more coming through. So I hope that helped, Emma. Louise, she's 34 weeks pregnant and hoping to breastfeed. Please can I have some advice and tips on if I should be expressing on top of breastfeeding, and if so, when should I start, and would I do this straight after the baby feeds? So we wouldn't normally suggest that you have to express initially unless there are problems. So if there's any reason that you think things aren't going well, so for instance, if you're getting really sore or your baby's struggling to attach, those are the times we would say, right, let's get on it, get your hand expressing, because we say on these sessions over and over again, you need to really push your milk supply, and usually a baby who's going well will do a fantastic job of that. But if your baby's not going on well, or you're sore, which would suggest your baby's not doing a good job, or your baby's not attaching at all, yes, we really, really want you to be hand expressing and pushing your milk supply. Because your milk supply is driven by milk removal, and it doesn't just happen. Although milk comes in somewhere between day 3 and 5, if you're not asking for it, you are not going to get a full milk supply. So you really have to let the baby drive it, or you drive it. So if your baby's doing a good job, fantastic, don't do anything else. If your baby's not doing a good job, really get on it. Because, and I know we say this quite often, as long as you have established a good milk supply, you've got time for your baby to learn how to breastfeed. It's really important to secure and establish your milk supply if there's any problem. So you only need to be expressing if you're encountering problems. Many women never express, just breastfeed their babies, and everything is fabulous. But it's your backup, it's your first aid. No, that's the only reason. We do teach everybody how to hand express, because when they go home, if it's the middle of the night and for any reason you can't get your baby on the breast, or let's say it's day 3 or somewhere between days 3 and 5, and you're suddenly really, really full and the baby can't get a mouthful, hand expressing off to make your breast comfortable and soft and for your baby to attach can make all the difference. So that's why we deem it your first aid, and why every woman should be taught how to hand express. So if you're about to be discharged from care, if you're in the delivery, if you're on in the hospital and you're about to be discharged from care and someone hasn't taught you how to hand express, please ask someone to teach you how to hand express before you leave, just as your first aid. Hopefully you won't need it. So I hope that answers your question, Louise. Laura has said her baby's now 8 days old. She had a rocky start due to tongue tie, or you pull off, which has now been addressed. I was badly engorged. There we go. That's exactly what I was talking about, the engorgement. Badly engorged until it was sorted. How can I build up the supply? So we had a bit of a delay. He also cluster feeds in the PM and evening, and then sleeps for hours unless I wake him. Should I let him sleep? If not, how often should I wake him to feed? So we're looking for 8 feeds in 24 hours. And if he's doing a nice cluster feed in the evening and then asleep, take it as long as he's gaining and pooing and weeing appropriate to age. So think about, what's he doing? Is he doing, he should be now doing 2 yellow stools, £2 coin size every single day, and they should be nice yellowy mustardy colour with flecks in them minimum, and 6 heavy wet nappies, so that you take off the dirty nappy, the wet nappy, and you have a fresh nappy and you go, yeah, I can feel that. That's about 2 tablespoons in there, and I can really feel there's a difference. Those are your signs that your baby's getting enough. And then the scales come later, so what your baby weighs. So your baby will have been weighed on day 5, and then if there was any concerns, they get weighed 48 hours later on day 7 and then day 9. If everything was all right on day 5, then they only get weighed again on day 10. So looking at the nappies is really important to make sure things are still going well. So 2 £2 coin size poos, yellow poos every day from day 4 onwards. 6 heavy wet nappies from day 6 onwards is what you're looking for. So if that's all happening and the weight gain isn't an issue, you let him sleep. Because what will happen is if he's doing cluster feeds and then some bigger gaps over a 24-hour period, you're going to have 8 feeds. It's going to have worked out. And I'm so glad you're over your rocky start, and keep going with it, Laura, because it's really tough when things like that happen. And it's brilliant if you can keep him going with your milk supply. It's really brilliant. So I'm just checking that I've covered everything you'd asked. So I hope that answers your question, Laura. Let's see what else we've got. I've got a few more coming through. Charlotte's come back again. Sorry to say that I have to go and sort Alicia out. Oh, well, that's lovely to have you here, Charlotte. We always like knowing you're with us. So enjoy, go and have fun with her. With her daughter. Lovely. Rachel's come. I just wondered about hackers and hygiene. Do you need to clean after each feed and store each collection separately? I get about 10 mils a go. So when it comes to breast milk, we don't have the same issues we do when it's formula milk. Breast milk is a live product. It fights off bacteria. You could use the hacker a few times in the day. If we think about it, when we say to you storage of breast milk, we would say to you that your breast milk is fine at room temperature up to 6 hours. So if you're going to use the hacker and you know you're going to use it again soon, you could just pop it in the fridge, or you could decant the milk and pop the hacker in something nice and clean and use it again. And we say the same with the pumpkins. So really, if you want to, you only need to wash it in hot soapy water, rinse in hot water, and then dry it with a clean paper towel or clean paper towel or a clean tea towel. If it can go in the dishwasher, you can pop it in the dishwasher because that will clean it thoroughly as well. So we don't worry in the same way as we do. So what you could do is use your hacker, decant the milk and pop it in the fridge, and then use your hacker again later, and then wash it the next time you use it. If that's within a 6 hour period. So I hope that helps. And it's the same with pumping, because we know that when mums are pumping, you're so busy. If you're breastfeeding and pumping and then giving your baby that milk, you are doing triple the work. It's so hard. So actually being able to know that you don't always have to wash your pump kits after every single session can be really liberating for mums, and it actually buys them a bit more time, hopefully for them to have a quick rest, something to eat, brush their teeth, or have some sleep, have something to eat. So just remember, with it, hot soapy water, rinse in hot water, dry with a clean paper towel or clean tea towel, or put it in the dishwasher. But at least every 6 hours. I hope that helps, Rachel. Emma's come back and said that was reassuring. I'm glad. That's brilliant. Francesca said, you mentioned breastfed babies are less likely to swallow air and need burping. My breastfed baby has recently started pausing during his feeds, burps and carries on. Is this normal? Could it be due to positioning or the nipple shield? More likely the nipple shield, because if you think about it, there's going to be a gap. So there's going to take air in there, isn't he? So if you think about the nipple shield going on, you've got a gap here. So it might be just at the beginning, they're getting a little bit of air. So that might be what's happening there. And if the seal breaks, they might get a bit of air then too. But they're obviously sorting the problem out for themselves. I love it. That's really funny. So I think your baby's obviously very clever, Francesca, and it's just sorting itself out on that one. If they're uncomfortable, they're going to come off. They're going to sort of, sometimes babies do come off. When I talked about a baby coming off at the end of the feed earlier, I talked about this. If your baby comes off and doesn't look calm and contented and happy and everything, and still grumpy and everything, then the likelihood is they haven't finished and they want some more. So, if a baby comes off and does a big burp, you just put them back, and you put them back to the same side then, because they haven't told you they've finished on that side. So that's a really good point, because that links into what we talked about earlier. So from the point of view of that is that, if your baby comes off, burps, put them back to the same side, and let them finish that feed. But it sounds like your baby's coping brilliantly, but I can only think that perhaps it's because when you do use a shield, there is a gap in, obviously when the baby goes on, there's a bit of a gap, so it probably does take a little bit of air in then, and then needs to get rid of it. But that may be it. So so see how you get on with that. And Rachel's come back and said thank you. So okay, well, we've used up all the questions again. We've got about 10 minutes left. I don't know if anybody's got any more questions for me. And see how we get on. It's nice to see you. I can see all those icons up there. So Laura's come back again now. Laura has said, thanks, Alex. Weighing enough, but we're not there on the poos. Only one every 1 or 2 days, but bigger than £2. 4 times bigger and brownie colour. I'm giving occasional formula top-ups as advised by local midwives and being weighed every 2 days. Does this mean I need to wake him for feeds at night? I think if he's not gaining as well as we would hope, then yes, you do need to keep it. You need to wake him up. So we'd be looking at a minimum of 3 hours between feeds. So when he's finished his clusters, he's done his clusters, you can have a bit of a gap and then wake him up again for another feed. When he's gaining appropriately, you can let him tell you when he wants to feed. But when we're trying to get a bit more in him, let him do his little cluster. have a little bit of a break, and then try again. We would normally go from the beginning to the beginning. Now that's really complicated when you've got a cluster, because if a baby's feeding like from 6 till 8 is where do you start that? But maybe go, you know, think well, actually if he's gone 6 till 8, I'm not going to go any longer than 11 before my next feed, and give that. And I know that's not quite what we'd normally say, but you've had that cluster, and then, you know, think maybe 2 hours, 3 hours max, and then it's always beginning to beginning. So if you feed again at 11, then you're going to be feeding again, you know, sort of at 2. So thinking about that, making sure you're going no more than 3 hours between feeds from beginning to beginning. Right, I hope that helps. So that was Laura's one there. I don't think we've got any more at the moment. I'm just thinking what else to talk about. So we've covered stomach sizes. So please don't forget about the stomach sizes, because it is so important to remember that it really changes radically. So if you go home syringe feeding, then you need to, you know, think about, actually, yeah, that's fine on day 1, but this is day 3, and you need to be increasing volumes. More questions coming through. Let me have a quick peek. Claire has come through. Hello, Claire. We know you. We've met you before. Hello, Alex. Lovely to see you. I have a very non-urgent question. My baby used to prefer the right breast, and it was always fuller. However, he seems to have now switched his preference to the left, and this breast is now always heavier and fuller. Can my supply really have adapted to his preference, or have I imagined this? Also, baby's now 19 weeks. Wow, 8.7 kilos. And my oversupply is finally stabilised. He feeds just 9 times a day now. Thank you for your encouragement and advice. Claire, you absolute star. How fabulous. That's so good to hear. Yes, your milk supply is utterly amazing. You know, we hear about people who have more or less shut down their milk supply. Something happens to the baby, you know, as in, you know, an older baby, and they decide they want to feed again. The baby goes back to the breast and builds that milk supply right up again. So absolutely, if he's taken a preference to that side, he's driven the milk supply on that side. So he's done a really, really good job. And I'm so glad that the oversupply has settled down, because it is so debilitating. You know, we talk about you know, how difficult it is when you haven't got enough milk, but actually having more milk, too much milk, is also really debilitating. It means that mums are stuck to the baby, stuck to the pump. Babies really struggle as well, because they get this overload of milk every time they go on the breast. So whilst we talk a lot about you know, the problems of not having enough milk, having too much milk is also really difficult. And I say, well done you, Claire, you've done an amazing job. And yes, I think he probably has done exactly that. And it's so lovely to hear from you. I'll just carry on, because I can see a few more coming through. Jessica's come through. Jessica says she's got a nearly 4-week-old, which seems to be feeding well. Breastfeeding doesn't seem painful anymore. However, noticed bruising around the skin near skin areola border. Is this a sign of breastfeeding issue? Similarly, also noticed sharp needle pain 1 hour after feeding. Is this normal for milk letdown? Lastly, no apologies needed for all the, she says, sorry for all the questions. The poos start varying in colour to sometimes quite a darker mustard browny green. Is this normal? So what we're looking at, so with regard to, I'll start with the poo bit, because that's the final one. The poos, we'd normally expect them to be yellow. On occasions they're not yellow. On occasions they might be brown, on occasions once in a while they might be more green, but as long as the majority of them are yellow, that's what we'd be looking for, because a yellow mustardy flecky poo is what we would expect a breastfed baby to be doing. On occasions though, you might see other nappies, but if they don't persist, we're not normally worried. So that's that bit about it. The pain, some mums do feel their letdowns as like needles, pins and needles down the breast, and it can happen at any time. So oxytocin, the hormone that drives your letdown, it can happen at any time. You could be thinking about your baby and lo and behold you have a letdown. You know, women who have been known to be pumping have looked at a pump and have had a letdown. So it becomes sort of automatic really, whereas before you've had to ask for a letdown. In time it becomes, you know, automatic. So it's not unsurprising. If it is a letdown, it's not unsurprising some women will feel that. With regard to the bruising, I would go back and just check everything is going well. You know, make sure that you've got a really good attachment. You've got, you know, your baby's going on really, really well. Remembering that positioning attachment picture that I keep putting up is my usual one. You know, thinking about this, that they're going on well. I mean, it's lovely that everything else is going well and that you're generally not in any pain or anything, but remembering, you know, this lovely head back, chin first, upper lip skimming the nipple, nose free while you're feeding. And just seeing, you know, just revisiting that. you could try something like OBS. I haven't mentioned OBS very much today, Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support. Get someone to have a look at what's happening and just see. They do online sessions and support. So maybe try Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support and see if they can give you a hand. Just see why you might be getting that bruising, because I think the bruising is probably the thing of all of this that I'm more concerned about. And see what's happening there, Jessica, and hopefully things will carry on going brilliantly, because obviously you've got to 4 weeks and you've done a great job. So let's moving on to Laura. Oh, Laura's talked about that. She said particularly helpful advice on timing between cluster feeds, etc. And cluster feeds are really, really normal. We see it a lot. You know, many babies will do that, and it can often be in that early evening period when you would normally have been trying to fix a meal, or you know, or sit down and have a rest. Or you know, I know it's really challenging. And in the past, when we weren't all working from home, it would be often the time when a partner might be walking in the door, and you've got this baby that you can't do anything with, and they're feeding, going left, right, left, right, left, right. It is completely normal for babies to do that for a period of time. We wish we knew when it would stop. We can't tell you, but it will. It won't carry on forever. Things do get better, I promise. In the past, people always used to talk about magic 6 weeks, that things got so much better at 6 weeks. I think, you know, often things start to settle down at 6 weeks. Your milk supply settles down at 6 weeks, and mums, you know, and you feel comfortable in your role as a mum and new role. So, but I think, you know, sort of, I'm glad that they're talking about the cluster feeds help, and hopefully it will reassure anybody else out there who's also finding that they have a lot of cluster feed, you know, babies cluster feeding, and it is really normal. Imi's just joined us, so she's Imi said she's gutted she's missed the talk today, and she said she hopes I'm well, and I am. Thank you, Imi. And you can watch it on the catch up on the YouTube, can't you? You have to watch it another time. I don't think we've covered anything you don't know already though, because you've been watching so many of them. Louise has come and said, how do you do these sessions every week? Really great info, thank you. We've been doing, I think I worked out this was our 27th. I don't normally do them from home, but I have a daughter at the moment who's not very well, so I'm working from home at the moment. So normally it would be me and a colleague, or two from the infant feeding team. I think I've talked about our team before. We're a team of 5. We're 3 full-time equivalents, although we're 5 of us, we're actually only 3 full-time equivalents, because we're all part-time. And we facilitate these sessions every Thursday at 2:30, and it's been so fantastic. We've been doing them since April, and it's been such a good way to reach out to people and answer those questions, and try and give information. You know, we've covered things like why skin to skin is so important. We cover things like I've talked today about the stomach sizes and why it's so important that your milk supply is driven to keep increasing the milk supply to meet the baby's needs, because it goes up and up and up. We've talked about how you can't love your baby enough, so it's really important to remember you can never love your baby enough, and that loving of your baby, that cuddling and keeping them close, is building your baby's brain. Oxytocin is your baby's brain's fertilizer, and keep it meeting their needs and helping soothe them, because they don't know how to do it. They can't do it. They need you, is what you need to be doing. And actually, you know, the whole thing that we've always heard in the past in our culture here in Britain is very much that we shouldn't spoil babies. You can't spoil a baby. You cannot give them too much love. You cannot cuddle them too much. They need it. It's for their development. They need it. So just don't ever feel that it's a weakness to be cuddling your baby. You're doing the best thing you can be doing in giving them cuddles. And babies that are breastfed, you can't feed them too much. So if a baby's feeding lots, that's completely normal, because babies feed for lots and lots of reasons, and not just food. It's a very, very important thing. It's comforting and calming for babies. It meets their needs for closeness and comfort. So I hope that answered your question, Louise, because we do these sessions every week, and we cover all sorts of things. I think we're almost at time, unless anyone wants to sneak a question in the last 2 minutes. But I shall keep an eye open and just see. So watch out for the information on Oxfordshire Maternity Voices Partnership. I'm sure there'll be information about us going into Tier 2 and what impact that's going to be having on services within the Trust. I wait with bated breath too, because I don't know what that's going to do for our breastfeeding clinics. So I'm a bit concerned we may have to shut those, which would be a real shame again, because we've only restarted in September. So fingers crossed that it's not going to impact on any of you with what services we're offering for you all, not just within infant feeding, but just generally through the hospital, and that we're not going to have to roll back, you know, and not be able to carry on having visitors, which is what we've been having, and allowing some partners at some of the appointments. So keep an eye open on what's happening. I'm sure it'll be posted as soon as possible. Right, well, as there's no more questions, I'm going to say thank you very much to all of you for all your lovely questions, and for our regulars who've come and supported me. And hopefully next week it will be 2 of us again in the hospital doing this session. And we'll be able to give you more information about what's happening service-wise going forward. And yeah, so happy feeding, and thank you again. Goodbye.